edit point. All right. All right, folks, I want to welcome you all today to our last session of this series. This is Marketing Your Community Engagement Experience to Employers. And we have a panel here today. We have two of AU alumnus, as well as one of our career advisors. Robert St. George is a career advisor in the working mostly with School of Public Affairs students. And then I would like Alana and Ananya to introduce yourselves and let us know where you're working, please.
Sure. Should I go first?
Sure thing, Alana.
Okay, great. So, yep, my name is Alana McGinty. I graduated from the School of International Service with my master's in international development in 2016. And since then, I've been working for a USAID, the United States Agency for International Development, implementing partner in project management. I work at a company called DAI, but for the last 3 years, I've worked on a USAID project called Digital Frontiers, and I'm a senior program manager for them. And in terms of my community engagement background, I was a Peace Corps volunteer in South Africa from 2011 to 2013. And my current community engagement is I stay actively involved in Friends of South Africa, which is an affiliate group for returned Peace Corps volunteers and general community members that are interested in South Africa. And I'm a part of the American University International Development Alumni Board. And I also, until very recently, have been an advisor with the sorority that I was in undergrad and continue to stay involved in, which is Phi Sigma Sigma.
And Ananya?
Yeah, that's awesome. So my name is Ananya Marathe, and I graduated from the School of International Service with my bachelor's in 2014, and I also have a minor in education. And in terms of community engagement, when I was at AU, I studied abroad in Kenya, and part of the Kenya program was having an internship. So I was able to intern with Carolina for Kibera, which in the Kibera slums, and that kind of, started my fascination and love for just being abroad. And after I graduated, I was also a Peace Corps volunteer in Madagascar. So I was a community health volunteer in Madagascar from 2016 to 2018. And then once I finished, I was working at a local NGO in DC doing safe motherhood work. And now currently I work at Facebook, and I'm a global escalation specialist. So my team deals with reports from governments and local NGOs on content that shouldn't be on the platform. So as you can imagine, it's varied. We never know what the day-to-day, right now it's been super busy, but definitely something that incorporates my love for international affairs. And it might be in a different sector, but I was pleasantly surprised to see how much the social media world, it really, really utilizes a lot of the skills that I learned on the ground from my international experience. So that's been just a pleasant surprise for me.
And Rob, let me put you on the spot. Do you want to talk? I sort of introduced you and what you do currently at AU. Do you want to talk a little bit about your background?
Yeah, I've been at AU 12 or 13 years. It's kind of lost count. But I spent much of my life abroad, most of it in Geneva, Switzerland, working initially as an advocacy campaigner for World Wildlife Fund. Basically, I was running their international campaigns, and then later in private business as a consultant. Excuse me, and mainly in knowledge management and internet technology in the earlier days, and then I worked for the United Nations for a number of years for the small agency called the UN Program to Combat Child Labor. After that, my family and I returned to the U.S., worked for World Resources Institute for a number of years in a senior executive position, ran a refugee relief organization for a while, and then finally came to AU to kind of shorten the discussion to less than a minute. So that's, I speak a couple of languages fairly well, and a third one, well, I mean, a couple besides English and French, and then a couple of others moderately well. And yeah, that's that. I was fortunate to be able to get into a position with World Wildlife Fund in Geneva relatively early in my career. I was 30-ish, maybe late 20s, and that was a springboard to other things.
Rob, what's your academic background?
I have, well, it wasn't called an MPP back then. It was called the Master of Arts in Public Policy, but it's equivalent to an MPP from the John Glenn School at Ohio State. And prior to that, I have 2 bachelor's degrees from Syracuse University, one of them from the Maxwell School.
Right, which is journalism, correct?
No, it's
policy.
It's the #1 ranked school of public policy in the U.S.
Okay.
Better than Kennedy School, actually. But School of Public Affairs at AU has jumped tremendously in the time I've been here, from probably 20th to definitely a top 10 school now, and possibly higher than that. I haven't paid attention to U.S. News rankings more recently.
Right. I think my question for our panelists, so, take yourself back to your undergraduate career or your graduate career, right? Your academic career. Did you, in your wildest dreams, would you have predicted, oh, that's where I'm going to end up? Like that is the, when you first started school, Ananya, where you're like, I'm going to be working at Facebook, right? Right. Okay. So this was not part of the initial plan. What were your initial thoughts about careers as you were at school?
Yeah, definitely for me, I never in my wildest dreams thought I would work in tech. And still to this day, if you want to talk imposter syndrome, it's been 2 years, I still have imposter syndrome. For me, when I came to AU, I thought that I was going to work at the State Department. I had my goal. I was going to go into the Foreign Service. That was my goal. And then it was only when I studied abroad in Kenya that I realized, hey, I love international development. And so I went into the Peace Corps, and my plan was to work in the NGO field, maybe get my master's in public health. And then one day I got a message from a recruiter on Facebook, on LinkedIn. And I thought it was a joke, because why would Facebook want me? And I went through with everything, and all of my experiences were related to the Peace Corps. And I ended up getting the job. And it wasn't until recently, being at Facebook, where I realized so many people at Facebook, sure, they might come from consulting backgrounds, all of these backgrounds, but what they don't have is the international experience, the adaptability, the soft skills that you gain when you go abroad, and you're able to be kind of comfortable with ambiguity, complexity, and there's not always going to be a process. And I feel like a lot of times when you do things internationally or abroad or with community service with people that are different from you, you learn these soft skills that then translate to you being successful in a corporate world where there's not always going to be processes. Things move fast. So for me, I never anticipated being at a tech company, but interestingly enough, some of the skills I've picked up over the years from my community service have allowed me to still be where I am.
Okay. And Alana, so DAI is consulting, right? Is that
Yep.
in a nutshell, right? It's a consulting, specialized, right? Consulting. Did you see yourself, was that your plan? I mean, going into grad school at AU?
I would say that I am not totally off of what my plan was, but it definitely, it's in the realm. When I was in undergrad, I didn't have any concept of what the field of international development was. I didn't actually know that you could have, you could be working in communications in international development, or whatever the job is, they need that skill in international development because it's consulting and project management. So I would say like the specifics are not exactly there, but I did know that I wanted to do something international, and I just didn't have the right background. I'm from Illinois, so I went to Illinois State University for my undergrad, and there's not a strong connection to the international development field in central Illinois. I think that's just the nature of being in Illinois. So when I came to DC, part of choosing AU was really understanding that that's where the space was working mostly and headquartered, but not really having a good sense of what the landscape of it looked like. So being at AU and getting that experience and getting to engage with professionals through panels like this was really helpful. And Ananya, everything that you said, I second that in terms of the soft skills that you get that are so important to bring when you're doing community engagement type work, whether it's a Peace Corps service experience or just organizational involvement. I think those soft skills are so transferable. And, part of this panel is talking about how you can use those skills and represent them. And I think that it is really possible to take organizational experiences and apply them to the field that you're interested in working in.
Yeah, let's dive a little deeper into soft skills, right? That's a term that many people in the audience have heard, or we use it a lot. What are the specific soft skills that you think really are, and we also call them transferable, they're very transferable, obviously, as you're speaking about this. What are the specific ones that you want to highlight? What are the ones that you academically developed, right? Because we work a lot, Rob and I, with students, and we kind of give them the good news that a lot of what the faculty are kind of training them and educating them about are skills that sort of then they can use in a work application if they want, right? Those transfer over. But what are some of the ones that you want to highlight? And then I do want to talk about Peace Corps, because you both have that experience, even though this isn't exactly a specific to Peace Corps, but it is service, right? So what are the soft skills that you think really have been of the most use as you're moving through your careers?
I can take a stab, but go first if you have some on the top of your mind.
You go for it. I have a few, but still processing. So
Sure.
Yeah, go for it.
I think one of the things that I'm thinking of most notably that's at the forefront of my mind, I just actually wrapped up or am wrapping up a recruitment process where we were recruiting an undergraduate intern. And so a lot of that experience is at the forefront of my mind. And I think that's particularly relevant to this audience. And one of the key things that I think, I don't know if it's a soft skill or not, but is communication and professional communication. And I'm wrapping sort of professional common courtesies into that as well. So I think if someone wants to stand out in a good way, making sure that in every single communication that you have with someone, whether it's an informational interview or an actual interview, you're following some of those more like you're sending a thank you note to someone after they spend time, even if it doesn't have to be a long formal thing. Just if you connected on LinkedIn, shooting them a LinkedIn message after they took the time to chat with you that doesn't have grammatical errors and things like that, like basic, just sort of, I consider those just professional common communication courtesies. I find those can be sort of not rare, but don't happen as often as I would sort of expect. And it stands out in a really positive way when someone does that. It helps to demonstrate that you can communicate well. And in a position like ours that we were recruiting for, you're an intern, but you're going to be put in front of our client, USAID, and you're actually going to have the chance to engage with them. And I need to feel really confident that I can have you in a meeting talking to our client, and you're going to present very, very professionally.
And in that moment with you, either in an informational interview or in an employment interview, you're expecting, well, this is their best foot forward, right? So when you're missing that creates doubt. It can create doubt about.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I'm happy to talk a lot about this particular recruitment process and some of the things that we saw or didn't see, but we had a lot of outstanding candidates. I mean, undergraduate students are coming and they have fantastic experience. We had a ton of great candidates from AU actually. And we're having to make decisions based on the smallest things because we just have to cull our shortlist further and further down. And so, if in your interview you choose to take an informal tone, our team is informal, but it is an interview, and we do need to feel confident that you know your audience and you know how to communicate appropriately to different audiences. Like I said, that's like, so basically communication in general for me is a huge thing. And that really does come across in a recruitment process, and can be the difference between receiving an offer or not.
Any other soft skills that stand out very strongly?
Yeah, I think for me, two themes of soft skills would be probably under teamwork and leadership. And I think for me, under teamwork, the things that I've picked up that I kind of, that you could call marketable skills are probably having good interpersonal skills like communication, like you mentioned, Alana, but also having diversity awareness or awareness, listening, observation, adaptability. Those are all things that we picked up in the Peace Corps. In the Peace Corps, your first 3 months that you spend in your community, you're just observing. And that's difficult. But I also think that when you enter a workplace, a lot of times you're observing, you're learning the workplace culture. And especially now with a big push for diversity awareness, there's been like a push to listen to perspectives that are different than yours. And if you spent 2 years in a country where you've been forced to learn a new language, you've spent a lot of time being aware of the differences, but also of the things that bring us together. So those are some soft skills that are marketable, but also under leadership, I'm thinking of things like mentorship, conflict resolution, or participatory development. Those are all things that you pick up when you're forced to live somewhere abroad or work with people that don't have your background. And I think those are soft skills that lead to hard skills of being able to train or onboard. I'm the training POC at Facebook, and I'm able to, I think it's one of the most difficult things in the world to be able to teach someone how to do something and how to do it well. And I think that I wouldn't have been able to pick up those skills if I hadn't been forced to be the student myself, and it gives you some empathy. So I really think those are some of the skills that are soft skills that can be transferable.
I do want to take a moment, Stephen, to welcome you. I know you're bouncing around between a couple of obligations, so we appreciate you being here. Stephen, do you want to let the audience know who you are, if they don't already know you?
Thank you all for coming. Stephen Anglesmith with the Center for Community Engagement and Service, and I also manage the Peace Corps programs actually through SIS, so thank you both. It's wonderful to see you again, Alana, and it's wonderful to meet you, and Rob. I just wanted to say, and maybe pose a question to Brian, if that's okay.
Sure.
One of the things, that what you're talking about from Peace Corps specifically, isn't necessarily just something from Peace Corps either. Some of the skills that you're talking about of observation and communication with folks that you're not necessarily familiar with, these are things that we experience and that we've seen even in short term, or maybe especially in short term community engagement experiences. Could you maybe speak more to that about how others in order to qualify for Peace Corps, you both likely have had other service experience. Could you speak to those skill sets kind of and in your experience before Peace Corps, and also what my other question, then I'm gonna just keep my mouth shut, but my another question is, I really want to know, is there anything during this period in your career, or wherever you find yourself, is there anything that you wish you had done more of in terms of gaining experience that during your university, either grad or undergrad? Is there anything that you could go back to and pursue more of in terms of skill set development? Students will often ask that, what else should I be doing, or what else could I be doing? So I'd love to hear you, in retrospect, 2020, right? What else could you do? And again, we're talking to students, of course, that are doing everything under the sun and working, on internship after internship. So, but those are my two questions. And again, that's community engagement prior to Peace Corps, and also what would you recommend to a younger you to pursue in terms of community service or other experience skill sets for your current position? Thank you both for being here.
I can take a stab at the second question that you asked, and then I may need to be reminded what the first one was. I've actually, I mentored a lot of AU undergraduates because I was an advisor for 5 years of the Phi Sigma Sigma sorority on AU's campus. And this answer is specific to AU students. In some cases, I would say you actually need to do less. I think that the pressure that some of the people that I engaged with, it was the sorority women of Phi Sigma Sigma, put so much pressure on themselves, and they're already doing so much. Like the resumes we're getting out of AU and other schools in DC, like GW and AU, the resumes are incredibly impressive. And, you know, honestly, some of the time I was like, you guys need to just enjoy, like, calm down and enjoy being an undergrad. It's also supposed to be fun. I don't know if everyone else would feel that same way, but just like some of the pressure that I saw them put on themselves was a little bit intense. I was the same way. I think it's like a whole campus of overachievers. I was that way on my undergraduate campus, and I actually don't have anything that I would change. I was really involved on campus, and I think I had such a rich experience from that. I think that sort of actually touches on your first question, Stephen, which was other service experiences. I was really involved in alternative breaks and had a great time doing that. And I got some of those soft skills that Ananya, you mentioned, like leadership. That's one that really stood out to me, and teamwork. You know, I completely agree that those are so important, and you're actually able to take those experiences and market them on a resume or in a cover letter when you're doing your first interviews out of undergrad.
Yeah, I agree so much with what you said, Alana. I think the pressure can be overbearing, and I think so many students compare themselves to others. But I think one thing that I've realized a little too late is you can't compare your own experience to someone else. No one else is you. And so I think some things that I would encourage AU students to do is seek out experiences. Like when I came to AU, I thought that this was my plan. I was going to go into the State Department, but I forced myself to do different things. I was on the cheerleading team for a year, and that was nowhere in my trajectory, but I did it. And it taught me a lot of things about commitment. And so what I would encourage people to do at AU is volunteer more. Even it doesn't have to be that you're volunteering or an internship. Even if you find, for example, I volunteered at a feminist conference for a class, just doing different things and taking advantage of your location. Like you were saying, Alana, in Illinois, you might not have had the same access to resources, but you're in Washington, DC, that's our capital. And if you're interested in French, go to the embassy or seek out opportunities. I think that's where we really had the advantage. It doesn't have to be something where you're doing it every day or a specific internship, a formal internship. If you see an event, go and talk to the people there, make those connections. And I think in DC, I think language is huge. Like you were saying, Robert, you speak a bunch of different languages. I think that's something that's super valuable, and that's a hard skill, but how do you build that? I think that you go and volunteer and maybe help teach English for someone, and you can learn different languages there. And I think also just having varied experiences. I used to babysit a lot when I was in DC, and through babysitting families, a lot of the families were influential. I learned a lot about what I want and what I don't want. So I think, Alana, a lot of what you said is there's not one path to success. I don't think I'm successful. I think that there's multiple paths, but I don't think students should be afraid to try it out because it's not permanent. You can try something and not like it, but now you know you don't like that, or you might figure out you do like it. So I think my two biggest pieces of advice would be volunteer, even if it's just for a day or just an event or just setting something up. You're volunteering, you're meeting people. And also don't be afraid to have varied experiences that might not fit in your trajectory, because no one knows what they're doing. It's all trial and error. So that would be my advice.
Well, and I think too, when I talk to students, Rob and I, the education system is very linear, right? You know when you're in 11th grade in high school, you know what the next year brings. And then if your path is to go to university, then you know what the next year and the next year. And then you hit this point, and then you can go to grad school right away, or maybe you can take some time, right? And explore and do some things and then go to grad school. But then it becomes, the analogy I make is, education's like a railroad, right? and it brings you to the coast, and then you have to get on a ship with sails. And you may have a destination in mind as you kind of craft your path, but things can happen to that ship with sails, right? You can hit a bad storm that's going to blow you in a different direction, but maybe you discover a treasure island, after that storm. So there are different, it's that adaptability and flexibility, right? So hopefully we're coming out of a pandemic. This is a worldwide situation which has derailed a lot of people's expectations on their path, right? And I know when I talk to students and they're nervous because Alana, I had a student who had 10 internships on their resume. 10. And I was like, oh, okay, that is like the maximum amount I think a person can do. They're just interning constantly, right? With 10 different organizations. High energy student, seemed to handle it. We laughed a little bit about it, right? But, and I think, you're both involved with hiring too. It isn't just the internship thing that gets the attention, right? There are other aspects of what can be on the resume, like volunteering, like leadership, where the student is crafting that message. So I think that's something Rob and I try to do as we talk to students. Yes, having a few good internships can be really helpful in your career, absolutely. But there are other experiences that are just as valued by employers, right? And I have 2 employers here shaking their head, yes, that is the case. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's also something to be said. I wouldn't discourage people from being ambitious when I say do less. I say, with your example with 10 internships, in that instance, that hopefully those were really good experiences for that person. But there's also value in depth instead of breadth. So
Right.
It is fine to go and have a whole bunch of different internship experiences, and I'm sure those were valuable. But it also is okay to get really involved in an organization and be involved with them long term throughout your undergraduate experience, and maybe try out some different leadership roles there. When I see that someone has been a president of an organization at their university, having been in leadership roles of different student organizations, I immediately can understand that person is going to bring some skills to the table that I really value as an employer, because I know what that takes. I mean, that's just me personally, but I really value that. So when I'm talking to someone that has held even, it doesn't have to be president, any type of leadership role, there comes responsibilities. And I think what I really hope for and look for when I'm doing interviews and looking at resumes is that someone's able to convey and convert that experience into something that's relevant to what we're talking about for the job description. So, you didn't ask about this, but like financial management was something that's going to be a part of the internship we were just recruiting for. Most people don't come from undergrad having done something that's financial management. But if you were in an organization and you organized a fundraiser, I think I would encourage students to look at their resume and look at it in the light of what is the job description and how can you reframe some of those experiences that you've had. You might not think that your fundraising experience gave you that much skill related to budget management, but it gave you something, and you at least were in charge of some money at some point. So being able to rebrand that into being relevant during a job interview or a resume, I think is really, really helpful.
Alana, while you were talking, it made me think, and I'd love to share my experience. I think one thing that I really want to be honest and upfront about is failure and the growth of I failed so many times. If you had told me that I would have been working at Facebook, I would have laughed. And I think one thing that really strikes me when you talk, Alana, is that we put so much pressure on ourselves to get it right, to always be doing something. But I had a really rough time my junior year when I came back from college, and I had a semester where I actually failed a class, and I want to be upfront about it because I would have thought that, oh my God, I failed a class. Like, how can I ever be successful in life? But because of that, I built resiliency, humility, and perseverance. And those are things, if my life just went perfectly, I never would have known what it's like to have to pick yourself back up and retake a class or ask a professor for extension and be honest. And I really want to get that across to people. Life isn't always going to be smooth sailing, but there's so much to learn in failure. And I actually applied to the Peace Corps last minute because I was so lost. I didn't know what to do. And that led to one thing after the other. I slowly picked myself back up. And today, you know, like, I'm so passionate about telling people, like, really, like, it's going to be okay. And failure isn't a bad thing. Like, we don't talk about it openly. Like right now, we're all talking about our successes, but I would be amiss if I didn't speak about that semester where I did fail at AU, but my advisor, people were there to support me and I asked for help. And now things are back and I kind of want to return that favor, but don't worry about failure. Like Alana, a lot of what you said really rung true to me. Like, it's true. Like, there's always other opportunities, always more. And there's so much growth and resiliency that comes when you do experience things not going your way. And that's something I really, really want to like emphasize.
When I conduct mock interviews with students, that is a question I always ask. Tell me about a time you failed.
Mhm.
And that is the number one question that throws people off, because again, they're so geared to talk about their successes. And when I explain why I ask that question is, it's going to, you know, like you said, there won't be this perfect, smooth, you know, movement through life. So where do you go from there when you do fail? When something goes wrong, right? Either because of something, mistake you've made, or life, right? Sometimes life will, you know, the best laid plans, right? Or then make contact with the world and then not so much. So where do you go from there, right? And how did you pivot, right? Yeah, I think that's a great point. So, yeah. I think, Alana, you mentioned informational interviews at one point, and I do want to talk a bit about that for students or for new graduates too, who are maybe kind of exploring a field, trying to establish professional connections. Are you approached by students a lot, sometimes, never, about informational interviews? And is there advice, you know, again, who were the students that did it right, or the new graduates that did it right? And then what were some maybe that could have been handled better? Do you have any examples of that?
I definitely have. I definitely can talk about this. I do a ton of informational interviews, and I actually also do informational interviews on the other side.
Mm-hmm.
I am happily and gainfully employed, but just today I actually was on a call with someone who works at the National Park Service. I've been having so much fun at national parks. I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
maybe someday I might want to
Mm-hmm.
be a park ranger. You know, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I consider gaining new skills and talking to people like a core part of just my life. So anyway, I like to pay it forward. I do a lot of informational interviews and I'm always happy to. And there are things that I like and some things where I would encourage folks to maybe consider. I think I already talked about, you know, I don't expect like a lengthy groveling thank you email, but like a thank you email from anyone is just nice, an acknowledgement that, you know, we spent time chatting and like I shared some resources with you, because usually I follow up with some specific resources based on what we chatted about. A piece of advice that I received when I was job searching was, don't say no to opportunities if someone at a company that you're talking with encourages you to apply to something. And I actually have I'll try and be as brief as possible with this example. My current job at DAI, I had an informational interview with someone at DAI, two people actually, both of them were AU alumni. And one of them sent me this job that I was like, I am overqualified for this. I do not want to apply to this job, but okay, fine. I'm going to apply to it anyway, because this person who works at DAI sent it to me and I want to acknowledge that there must be some reason that they sent me this job. I had been applying to tons of other things at DAI, wasn't getting interviews. I got an interview for the role that this person recommended I apply to. And in like the best case scenario that I could have never imagined, they actually called me and they were like, we think you're overqualified. We're not going to consider you for this role. We want to bring you on in this position. So you never know. I felt I was overqualified and almost didn't even apply because of that. And I am at DAI because I was able to get an interview for that role, and then they bumped me up to a role that I felt was appropriate. So I was very grateful for that. But if I had like put my nose up at that opportunity and been like, I'm really only looking for things that are X, Y, and Z, I would probably not have gotten my foot in the door to get an interview and then just demonstrate, that I had the qualifications for the role. So I have had people sort of reject opportunities that I've suggested for them. If you're working at a company, you have a good idea of what skill set someone's bringing. Like one time I had a student who I had just chatted with tell me, like I sent them an internship, which was paid, an internship opportunity. And they were like, oh, no, thanks. I'm just looking for full-time opportunities. And that is fine and fair. Like I said, I understand, but I was sending that to them to be able to get their foot in the door, which is really important in international development, which is an oversaturated market where tons of people have to take entry level just to get their foot in the door. So yeah, I mean, that's a big piece of advice that I have is like, don't reject opportunities. And if someone's sending you something, there's a reason why they're sending it to you.
Right. Did either of you, as you were looking at Peace Corps, did you say, oh, this is 2 years. I'm not, this is 2 years of my life. I have students, when I suggest, opportunities like Peace Corps or other, fellowships, they're like, oh, that's 2 years. I'm locked in, and I'm thinking 2 years, that goes by in a blur. I don't even remember, I think something happened last week and it was 2 years ago, but I get it. For, young folks, 2 years seems like a long time. Did it seem like a really long time, those 2 years?
Ananya, do you want to go?
Yeah, it's funny you say that because that was probably my biggest hesitation. I was
Okay.
like, oh no, like it's gonna
Mhm.
put me back. But the way, this might not be the best advice, but you have a choice, nothing is permanent. And I committed to those 2 years, but you can always leave. Like you're not chained there. And I'm not saying go in with that mindset, but
Mhm.
like, again, life doesn't always go as you planned, but I wouldn't stop the fear of 2 years, even preventing you from going there. Because the way I saw it, most of my friends, after we graduated, they were in their entry level jobs for 2 years, or at least a year and a half.
Right.
And at that point, I was almost halfway done with my service. And I think, especially with things like Peace Corps, it's broken up into chunks. So you have 3 months of training and then 3 months before your first conference. And there are things that break it down. And I honestly think you can do anything for a year. So why not tack another year? And so for me, I think going in, I kept telling myself, okay, you can always leave if you're not locked in. But just knowing that you have that option was helpful, and just breaking it apart and just understanding that most people are going to be doing something for at least a year. So just what's another year, and that's kind of how I saw it.
Brian, can I add something to that?
Yeah, sure, Steve.
One of the things that that this touches upon that I see, with a lot of students is that they're tied to this academic timeline or this academic schedule that people graduating junior, people approaching their junior year and especially approaching the end of senior year, they're like, oh, I need to have something wrapped up by this summer, because this summer, next semester, there's no next semester. When you graduate, that's it. That's the semester's over. It doesn't, the timeline, the academic timeline is an arbitrary calendar, and there's no reason that you have to have a specific thing done. You don't have to go to grad school within a specific amount of time. When you're done with grad school, you don't have to, start. It's all not arbitrary, but it's all made up at that time, at that point. So you can pursue things, and I really like what you guys said about nothing. Everyone's kind of faking it. Not really, maybe not faking it till you make it, but no one's really knows what comes next. So I love that your story at Facebook. I love that it's that you wouldn't, the things that you have done have led you there, but it's impossible to predict. So, Alana, your advice of don't say no to these opportunities as they come up. I think that's an example of how, that's such an important piece of advice. I agree with completely.
Also, Brian, if I might interject, the Peace Corps in particular is a tremendous door opener into a lot of employers and a lot of career opportunities. If we're just talking about the international development sector, the contractors to USAID in DC, of which there are many, and there's a lot of employment available there. I know for a fact that generally speaking, they give strong preference to people who are returned Peace Corps volunteers. Now there's other skills and sets of experiences they're looking for individual jobs, but that as a general principle, that's true. In part because they know that these are people who have lived abroad, usually in fairly challenging circumstances. They are not people who spent 2 years drinking wine in Paris, okay? And as pleasant as that would be. In addition, at the United Nations, where I worked for many years, which is hyper competitive to get into, virtually any UN agency, I would say that a significant majority of the Americans I ran into at the UN were returned Peace Corps volunteers. And the reason is Peace Corps is highly respected in other countries. It's, the stereotypes that a lot of people who are not Americans have about Americans is, well, many of them don't even have a passport, and they don't know anything about anywhere else, and they don't speak any languages, and blah, blah, blah. But they know, for example, executives in the United Nations know that that's not true of people coming out of the Peace Corps. And so it's not necessarily a guarantee you're going to get into the UN, but it sure helps open a lot of doors. So I just thought I'd mention that. Also, by the way, with regard to international development, one thing we haven't mentioned is the place where Alana works, Development Alternatives, is either the biggest or second biggest international development contractor there is. I have no idea how many people many thousands of people I'm sure work for DAI. And getting an offer, well, I don't know whether it was an offer or just an offer to interview that you mentioned at DAI is a big deal. And I suspect that the student who turned that down may well have not understood what DAI is and how important that is. It's not some, $500,000, 3-person NGO scrimping along, trying to do good work in one small Central American country. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but
Right.
It's a big it's big time, okay, within international development. Yeah, it's an opportunity that person passed up on to their fault.
When Rob and I hear stories like that, we're always like, oh no. No, I forgot what I had something really profound to ask, and now I can't remember what it was. I've been trying to write things down, but I didn't get a chance to write it down. Let's see. Well, what are some what are some mistakes that you're seeing in applicants, right? Are there things that they could easily correct when you're seeing them apply, or are there things you're seeing on their resume and you're like, I know that there's a way that you should kind of communicate this to me, but I'm not hearing it, right? I mean, do you ever see that happen? Because as Rob and I, as we are, advising students, we talk about again, there's no bad experience. You can gain skills from experience, but it's your job to sort of highlight those skills and experiences on your resume, in LinkedIn, on LinkedIn, and during the interviews and the conversations and the networking. Do you ever see, is that something you ever see where you see folks that are like, you're like, I know there's gems hiding under this, rock here, then you're not highlighting them?
Yeah, I can take a brief answer at this. I will say that generally speaking, students' resumes who I review from AU and GW in particular are they're on another level. So whatever you guys are doing at the Career Center, keep doing it. And I would really encourage students to continue working with you and do resume reviews with you. It really is, it's another level of resumes for undergraduates. So I see mistakes and things that I'd like to reach out to someone and be like, oh, if you just did this thing, this would be so much better. But honestly, not with AU or GW students whose resumes I look at. Where I would encourage some focus is on interviewing. So you've gotten your resume reviewed, you have a great cover letter, we select you to be a shortlisted candidate, you interview with us. The first interview might go really well, and then we get to a second interview, and I see people sometimes like fall apart at this stage, and I really would encourage everyone to be familiar with the STAR method and to prep for their interviews with the STAR method and become really, really familiar with it and like make it your best friend. Because students who are able to, and I don't even know what that acronym stands for. Hopefully you guys can jump in with that.
Oh, Rob is our champion of teaching the STAR method. So
Yeah, I've been trained, it's behavioral interviewing, and I've been trained in it both in Europe and the United States. And I've probably done 500 mock behavioral interviews. And I've also been the target myself of behavioral interviews probably at least a dozen times. It's situation, task, action, and result. So the way to tell if you're being asked a question like that is it's usually in the form of, please tell us about a time when, please describe a time when, such as, please describe a time when you believe you used your best interpersonal skills to solve a problem or achieve a goal. Please tell us about a time when you were working in a team situation and one of the people on the team was significantly failing to do their part of the work. And I could rattle off about 7 or 8 others, but you'd get bored. And the way you answer it is, if it was a situation like somebody failed to hold up their end of a team situation, then it is a situation, not a task. You were not assigned to work with somebody who was going to be, difficult. You just happened to be that way. But most of the time, the questions involve assignments. You were assigned to do this or that project or this or that task. You describe that fairly quickly, 20 seconds or so, and then you get into the action or actions you took. It needs to adhere to a strict chronological timeline of what your actions were, because if you begin jumping around in the timeline while you, the interviewee, it's perfectly obvious because you experienced it. The people who are interviewing you are going to get lost, and then you've probably lost the interview and your chance. And then finally, you talk about what the result or results were, and you always need to be prepared for a follow-up question, which I call the additional R on the STAR, which is, upon reflection, if you could do it over again, is there anything you would do differently? And basically, when they are asked that question, the employer is expecting you to be constructively self-critical and not, no, I never made any mistakes. It was fine. It was great. Not that anyone would ever say it that way, but that's the idea. And I do a ton of behavioral mock interviewing, and it's at least for students in school public affairs. Yeah.
And I think that reflection and that constructivity goes back to what Ananya was saying about failure, in a sense of like, that's that critical thinking, right? That I think is an essential skill as well. And it's being able to analyze what you've done and say, you know what, okay, this worked. Here's maybe how I could have, restructured X or Y, or did this component in a different way, or reached out and included other people to make this better, right? Yeah, it's that constructive criticism. Ananya, anything you'd like to, any feedback that you would give to students about, again, what they're doing really right, what maybe you see things and you're like, oh, if you did that a little differently, it would have a better result?
Yeah, definitely. I think 2 pieces. First, about resumes. I think one thing that is really important is tailoring your resume to the job that you're applying to. I think a lot of times you see people just do a generic resume, then they send it out. But I think a lot of times companies have AI or technology that is looking for specific buzzwords or keywords. So I think if you're really genuine and serious about a job, look at the job description and kind of tailor it, add in some buzzwords in your resume, your cover letter. I think that really makes a difference, especially if the first round is automation, it picks up on the buzzwords. So I would say that's one of my biggest pieces of advice for resumes. Tailor it, make it, use the buzzwords in the job description, especially if you have that experience. In terms of interviewing, I think the big one for me is humility. When you're applying for a job, you're going to spend 8 hours at this job. Your employer is looking for someone that they want to work with. Someone, when days are bad, hours are long, you want someone that is going to have your back. So I think for me, that's a big one. I think don't be afraid to just be calm and ask clarifying questions. In my Facebook interview, it was a long process. There was no way I knew the answer to all the questions. But one thing that I realized early on is they don't expect you to know everything. What they want to know is your thought process, how you think, how's your critical thinking, your reasoning. Are you able to walk them through, okay, I don't know exactly the specifics, but this is how I would think about it. I think that's my biggest thing, because let's be honest, you're not going to know everything. And I was very clear in my interview. I said, they asked me like, what's something your colleagues would, say about you down the line? And I said, I'm not the smartest person in the room, but I try. And that's something that stands true. And I think that's something that resonates with people. People don't expect to be always hiring the smartest person in the room, but they want someone that's willing to try, that's eternally curious, and that's willing to learn and is willing to be self-aware. And I think if you can reflect that across, most employers want someone like that.
Great point. Great point. We have a few minutes left. We have about 5 minutes left. Rob or Stephen, do you have any additional questions?
I don't.
Okay.
Thank you.
I would say, what are the most important software skills that you believe are available? Particularly with regard to international development, I have heard again and again and again, including from within my own family and someone who used to work in international development, that strong Excel skills and the ability to manipulate data using filters and pivot tables in Excel is really important. But are there other, aside from that, well, number one, do you agree with that? And secondly, are there other kinds of software or analytic skills that you think are particularly important?
I think that depending on what your role is, being able to do a pivot table could be important. I don't know how to do a pivot table, and I hopefully never have to learn. But that's because I try to stay away as much as I can from like detailed budget analysis. I have my budgets, I have my pipelines, and those are in Excel. But yeah, I don't use pivot tables personally. I don't worry about the new generation in terms of their software ability, because there's so many different project management tools out there, and each company or each federal agency has like its own thing. USAID's using Google Suite now. DAI uses Microsoft. I mean, just being able to come in and adapt to those different management tools, I think, is what's important. And with students who are in school now, like, they're going to be better at that than I am, and probably all of us. So I don't actually worry about that. And I suppose for the specific role, it would probably vary from type of position to type of position. But for project management in general, the types of skills that we see people coming out of school with are great.
Yeah, and to add on to that, I think one thing that was really intimidating to me was how to market myself when I came back from the Peace Corps. But one thing that I realized is, for example, monitoring and evaluation. That's a technical skill, right? Those are some things that we did in the Peace Corps, whether it was ethnography reporting or data analysis or barrier analysis surveys, even doing surveys. That's a form of monitoring and evaluation. You're monitoring something and then you're evaluating it. So I think one recommendation that I would do is, because I got scared when you said data, I don't necessarily have those technical skills, but actually if you take a minute and write down everything that you've done, there are ways that you can say, oh, actually, doing ethnography surveying, that's a form of data analysis. That's a form of reporting, and that can go under monitoring and evaluation. And there's different types of apps, things that you use. So I would say, like, make a list of everything that you've ever done, whether it's small or the exposure that you've had. And I'm willing to bet that you can bucket it under one of those catchphrase terms like monitoring and evaluation or data analysis or some sort of technical skill.
Right. Thank you very
Totally
much.
agree.
Right. So one of the, when Stephen and I and Samantha, you know, we're thinking about this presentation, one of the reasons we wanted panelists like Alana and Ananya was we wanted students to see that, you know, again, service, public service can lead, you know, those skills and experiences can lead to just anywhere as far as employment and careers go. And that there's almost no such thing as pigeonholing yourself anymore when it comes to careers. It's sort of difficult, I think, to do that. And who knows in 10 years or in 20 years, the careers that will exist that do not exist now, right? That this is a constant movement and evolution. So I want to thank both of you for spending time with us. Thank you, Rob, for also being here. And Stephen, I think we had another good one here. This is good. So.
Great.
Right.
Thank you both for being here. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for giving back yet again. Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
All right.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
Take care, everyone. Bye.
You too. Bye.